Hello, where are you watching this video from? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoy heartwarming stories that show how love can transform everything, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. The crystal chandelier trembled with each piercing scream that echoed through the Buckhead mansion. Robert Miller pressed his palms against his temples, his perfectly pressed business suit wrinkled from another sleepless night. 8 months. 8 months of this relentless crying that had driven away 12 nannies and was slowly destroying everything he'd built. Mr. Miller. Sylvia Henderson stood in the marble foyer, her 20 years of nanny experience evident in her composed posture, yet her eyes betrayed pure exhaustion. I'm afraid I must tender my resignation, effective immediately. Robert's heart sank. Sylvia was supposed to be different. The agency had sworn she could handle any situation. But you've only been here 3 days, Robert said, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Those babies. Sylvia shuddered, adjusting her cardigan with trembling hands. In all my years, I've never encountered anything like this. They cry for 8 hours straight, Mr. Miller. 8 hours. It's as if they're... She paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound insane. As if they're mourning something they can't possibly understand. From upstairs, the wailing intensified. John and Gabriel, his 8-month-old twins, were awake again. Robert glanced at his Rolex, 3:47 a.m. In 3 hours, he needed to be at the office for a crucial meeting with Japanese investors. His hands shook as he signed Sylvia's final paycheck. I'm sorry, she whispered, practically fleeing toward the door. I truly am. The massive oak door closed with a finality that seemed to seal Robert's fate. He was alone again with his sons, the children who had cost him everything. Mrs. Grace Williams emerged from the kitchen, her silver hair perfectly pinned despite the early hour. At 55, she'd been with the family for 15 years, long before Anna, before the babies, before everything fell apart. That makes 12, Grace said softly, her southern accent thick with concern. The agency won't send anyone else, Robert replied, loosening his tie. We're blacklisted. Problematic clients, they said. Grace's weathered hands clasped together. Mr. Robert, those babies need... What they need is their mother. The words exploded from Robert's lips before he could stop them. The mansion fell silent except for the distant crying. But she's gone, Grace. She's gone, and they're here, and I don't know how to... He couldn't finish. How could he tell Grace that every time he looked at John and Gabriel, he saw Anna's face in her final moments? How could he explain that their very existence was a reminder of his greatest loss? Sir, Grace's voice was gentle but firm. Maybe what they need isn't another nanny. Maybe what they need is their father. Robert turned away, unable to meet her knowing eyes. Through the tall windows, Atlanta's skyline glittered in the distance, indifferent to his suffering. Tomorrow he'd have to face Andrew Davis and the board, explain why his productivity had dropped 60%, why clients were canceling contracts because he arrived at meetings looking like a ghost. But tonight, all he could do was climb the stairs to his room, the room farthest from the nursery, and try to block out the sound of his children calling for something he couldn't give them. What Robert didn't know was that miles away in rural Georgia, a young woman named Lucy Carter was packing her few belongings into a battered suitcase, preparing for a journey that would change all their lives forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the circular driveway as Lucy Carter approached the mansion that seemed to rise from the earth like a monument to success. Her worn sneakers made no sound on the pristine pavement, and she clutched a folded newspaper clipping in her sweaty palm, a housekeeping position advertised in yesterday's Atlanta Journal-Constitution. At 26, Lucy had the kind of understated beauty that people noticed only in quiet moments. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes, though clean and pressed, spoke of a life lived paycheck to paycheck. But her green eyes held something rare, a depth born from suffering transformed into strength. She'd driven 3 hours from Valdosta in her ancient Honda Civic, leaving behind the only home she'd known since her parents' death 10 years ago. Her brother Matthew, now 16, was staying with their elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson for the week. If this job worked out, she could finally give him the life he deserved. The mansion's front door was imposing, solid oak with brass fixtures that probably cost more than Lucy's yearly income. She raised her hand to knock, but froze when she heard it, crying. Not just any crying, but the desperate, heart-wrenching wails of babies in distress. The sound cut through her like a knife, instantly transporting her back to those dark nights after the accident, when 2-month-old Matthew had cried inconsolably, sensing the absence of their mother's warmth. "Sweet Jesus," she whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her heart. The door opened before she could knock, revealing a distinguished black woman with kind eyes and silver hair. "You must be here about the housekeeping position, Mrs. Grace said, though her expression was puzzled. "I'm Grace Williams." "Yes, ma'am, Lucy Carter." Lucy's southern manners kicked in automatically. "I saw the advertisement and—" A particularly loud wail from upstairs made both women wince. "How old are they?" Lucy asked, her professional caregiver instincts overriding her nervousness. 8 months, twins, John and Gabriel." Grace's voice carried a weight of exhaustion. "Their mother passed during childbirth." "Their father?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He's a good man, but he's drowning." Lucy nodded, understanding more than Grace could possibly know. "May I see them?" Grace looked surprised. "Child, you're here for housekeeping, not—" "Please." There was something in Lucy's voice, an authority that came from experience. "I know that sound. I know what they're trying to say." Against her better judgment, Grace led Lucy upstairs. The crying grew louder with each step, until they reached a beautifully appointed nursery with 2 matching cribs. Inside, 2 identical babies writhed in distress, their faces red from exhaustion. Lucy approached slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. "Hello, sweethearts," she said softly, her voice cutting through the chaos like a lullaby. "I hear you. I hear you trying to tell us something." The crying didn't stop, but something shifted. Both babies turned toward her voice. "When did they last eat?" Lucy asked, not taking her eyes off the twins. 2 hours ago. They eat fine, sleep fine during the day, but every night—" Grace shook her head helplessly. Lucy studied the room, taking in every detail. The cribs were positioned against the far wall, facing away from the door. The decoration was pristine but sterile, like a showroom rather than a home. Most tellingly, there wasn't a single personal item. No photos, no mementos, nothing that spoke of love or connection. "Where's their father's room?" Lucy asked. "End of the hall. He moved there after—" Grace didn't finish. Lucy's heart clenched. She'd seen this before in her own mirror during those first terrible months after the accident. The babies weren't just crying from colic or discomfort. They were crying from abandonment, from the absence of love they could feel but couldn't understand. "Mom," Lucy turned to Grace, "I need to speak with Mr. Miller. Child, he's in meetings all day, and frankly, he's not in any state to—" "This can't wait." Lucy's voice carried a quiet urgency. "Those babies are breaking apart, and so is he. I've been there. I know how to help." Grace studied Lucy's face for a long moment, seeing something that gave her hope for the first time in months. "He'll be home around 6, Grace said finally. "But I warn you, he's not the same man he was before Anna died. Grief has made him hard." Lucy looked back at the crying twins, her heart already attached to these children she'd known for 5 minutes. "Then we'll just have to help him remember how to be soft again." As if responding to her words, one of the babies, John or Gabriel, she couldn't tell yet, reached a tiny hand toward her voice. Lucy smiled, the first genuine smile she'd felt in months. Some people are born to save others. Lucy Carter was about to discover she was one of them. Robert Miller's BMW pulled into the circular driveway at 6:47 p.m., 17 minutes later than usual. The delay would cost him another sleepless night with the twins. But the meeting with Davis Industries had run long. His company was hemorrhaging money, contracts were being cancelled, and his business partners were losing faith in his leadership. He sat in the darkened car for a moment, gathering strength for another evening of chaos. Through the tall windows, he could see Grace moving about the kitchen, preparing dinner he wouldn't eat. The thought of facing those crying babies made his chest tighten with a familiar dread. The front door opened before he reached it, and Grace appeared with an expression he couldn't read. "Mr. Robert, there's someone here to see you. About the housekeeping position." Robert frowned. "I thought we agreed to suspend hiring until—" "Sir, she's different. She's upstairs with the babies right now." "What?" Robert's voice sharpened. "Grace, we can't have strangers unsupervised with—" He stopped mid-sentence. The house was quiet. Not the tense quiet of exhausted children finally collapsing, but actual peace. No crying, no wailing, no sounds of distress. Robert took the stairs 2 at a time, Grace hurrying behind him. He burst into the nursery expecting to find his children drugged or harmed, but instead discovered something that stopped him cold. A young woman sat in the rocking chair between the cribs, gently patting John's back while humming a soft melody. Gabriel lay in his crib, not asleep but calm, watching her with the focused attention babies reserved for people they trusted. The room felt different, warmer somehow, as if love had been quietly smuggled in during his absence. "Who are you?" Robert's voice was sharp, defensive. "What did you do to them?" Lucy looked up, and Robert felt the full force of her green eyes. There was no judgment there, no pity, just understanding. "I'm Lucy Carter, Mr. Miller. I came about the housekeeping job, but your sons needed something more immediate." "They're not crying," Robert said, as if stating an impossibility. "No, sir. They're listening." "Listening to what?" Lucy stood slowly, settling John back in his crib. "To someone who understands their language." Robert bristled. "My sons don't have a language." "They're 8 months old. Every baby has a language, Mr. Miller. Crying is just the beginning. They're trying to tell you something, and they've been trying for months." "And what exactly do you think they're saying?" His tone was mocking, but there was desperation underneath. Lucy met his gaze steadily. "That they know their father blames them for their mother's death." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. Grace gasped behind him. The babies, as if sensing the shift in energy, began to fuss slightly. "You need to leave." Robert's voice was ice. "Now." "Mr. Miller," "I said, leave." He stepped forward, towering over Lucy's smaller frame. "You know nothing about my family, nothing about what we've been through." Lucy didn't flinch. Instead, she moved closer to Gabriel's crib, her presence immediately calming the baby. "I know about loss," she said quietly. "I know about guilt. When I was 16, my parents died in a car accident. My baby brother was 2 months old. I blamed him at first. If they hadn't been coming back from buying baby supplies, they'd still be alive." Robert's anger faltered slightly. "Matthew cried for months just like John and Gabriel. Nothing worked until I realized he wasn't crying from colic or hunger. He was crying because he could feel my resentment, my blame. Babies know, Mr. Miller. They always know." "That's ridiculous," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Lucy moved to John's crib. "When was the last time you held them? Really held them, not just for a diaper change or feeding?" Robert's silence was answer enough. "They're calling for you," Lucy continued. "Every night they cry because they're trying to reach a father who won't let them. They can feel your pain and they think it's their fault." "It is their fault." The words exploded from Robert's chest like a dam bursting. "If Anna hadn't been pregnant, if we hadn't wanted children, she'd still be alive. Every time I look at them, I see her dying and I can't. He broke down then, months of suppressed grief and guilt pouring out. Grace moved to comfort him, but Lucy held up a gentle hand. "Mr. Miller," she said softly, "may I tell you what your wife would say if she were here?" Robert looked up, tears streaming down his face. "She'd say that love isn't supposed to be easy, but it's always supposed to be worth it. And those babies, they're her gift to you, not her curse." For the first time in 8 months, Robert really looked at his sons. John had Anna's nose, Gabriel her delicate ears. They weren't the thieves who'd stolen his wife. They were the only part of her he had left. "I don't know how," he whispered. Lucy smiled, the kind of smile that promised miracles were possible. "Then let me teach you." As if summoned by hope, both babies began to gurgle softly, reaching their tiny hands toward their father's voice. For the first time since Anna's death, Robert Miller took a step toward his children instead of away from them. And in that moment, the healing began. "Start by picking up John," Lucy said gently, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert stood frozen beside the crib, his hands trembling. 8 months of self-imposed distance had created a chasm that felt impossible to cross. What if he dropped him? What if John cried harder? What if touching his son brought back the devastating memory of Anna's final moments? "I can't," Robert stepped back. "I'll hurt him." "Mr. Robert," Grace's voice was thick with emotion. "You held them at the hospital. You cut their umbilical cords, you named them. That was different. Anna was... He couldn't finish. Lucy moved closer, her presence somehow making the impossible seem manageable. Tell me about the day they were born. Robert's eyes grew distant. February 15th. Anna had been having contractions for 12 hours. She was so excited, so ready to meet them. She kept saying they were going to be Daddy's boys, that they'd have my stubborn streak and her gentle heart. What else? Lucy encouraged. She made me promise something while we waited. She was scared about the delivery, had this premonition that something might go wrong. She made me swear that if anything happened to her, I'd love them enough for both of us. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Robert had broken the most important promise he'd ever made. She knew, Lucy said softly. Mothers always know. That's why she made you promise. Gabriel began to fuss, sensing the emotional tension in the room. Without thinking, Robert's gaze shifted to his son, and for a moment, the baby's eyes locked with his. It was like looking into Anna's eyes. The same depth, the same trust. He looks like her, Robert whispered. They both do. They're her legacy, Mr. Miller. Her love made manifest. Lucy reached into John's crib, lifting the baby with practiced ease. Here, don't think, just feel. Before Robert could protest, she placed John in his arms. The moment was electric. 8 months of separation bridged in an instant. John's crying stopped immediately, replaced by a soft cooing sound Robert had never heard before. He knows me, Robert breathed, wonder replacing fear. Of course he does. You're his father. John's tiny hand wrapped around Robert's finger with surprising strength. The simple gesture broke something inside Robert, not breaking apart but breaking open. Months of suppressed love flooded through him like a dam burst. I'm sorry, he whispered to his son. I'm so sorry I wasn't here. Gabriel, not wanting to be left out, began reaching toward them from his crib. Grace, tears streaming down her face, lifted him and placed him in Robert's other arm. For the first time in 8 months, Robert Miller held both of his children. They fit perfectly against his chest, as if they'd been waiting for this moment their entire lives. The baby's crying ceased completely, replaced by contented sighs. They're so small, Robert marveled, as if seeing them for the first time. But strong, Lucy added. They've been fighting for your love all this time. What do I do now? Robert asked, his voice vulnerable as a child's. Now you learn to be their father, one day at a time, one moment at a time. Grace wiped her eyes with her apron. Miss Lucy, how did you know what to do? Lucy's smile was tinged with old pain. When Matthew was a baby, I made every mistake you can imagine. I was angry, resentful, overwhelmed. But babies forgive everything if you're willing to try. They teach you how to love them, if you let them. Robert looked down at his sons, both now sleeping peacefully in his arms. Will you stay? He asked Lucy. Will you help me figure this out? The housekeeping job? No, Robert said firmly. The job of teaching a father how to love his children. Lucy looked around the room, at Grace's hopeful face, at the baby sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, at a broken man beginning to heal. I'll stay as long as you need me. The salary? We'll figure it out, Lucy interrupted. Some things are more important than money. As if responding to the promise of love finally fulfilled, both babies sighed in their sleep. Outside, Atlanta sparkled in the distance, but inside this nursery, a family was being reborn. Robert looked at Lucy with something approaching reverence. How do I thank someone who's given me back my children? You don't thank me, Mr. Miller. You thank Anna. This is her doing. She sent me here. Grace nodded knowingly. Angels come in many forms. For the first time in 8 months, the Miller mansion was filled with peace. And in the morning, Robert Miller would wake up not dreading the sound of crying, but eager to hear his children's voices calling for their father. The healing had begun, but the real miracle was yet to come. 3 days later, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. Robert had moved his bedroom to the room adjacent to the nursery, and for the first time since Anna's death, John and Gabriel were sleeping through the night. The change in the household was palpable. Grace hummed while cooking, Robert actually ate meals, and the babies gurgled happily during their waking hours. But Lucy sensed there was more to the story. During quiet moments, she noticed Grace staring wistfully at the ceiling, as if seeing through to the floor above. When asked about the upstairs rooms, Grace would quickly change the subject. Robert never went to the second floor at all, taking the main staircase only to reach his old room for clothing. "Grace," Lucy said one morning while the babies napped, "what's on the third floor?" The older woman's hands stilled on the dish she was washing. "Just storage, child. Nothing important. And the master suite on the second floor." Grace's shoulders tensed. "Hasn't been opened since—" She didn't finish. Lucy understood. Some rooms become shrines to loss, too painful to enter, too sacred to abandon. "He's healing, you know," Lucy said gently. "Robert, he's remembering how to be a father. I see it. Lord knows I've prayed for it every day." Grace's voice was thick with emotion. "But there's still something missing. Those babies need more than just their father's love. So they need to know who their mother was. Tell me about Anna." Grace's face softened with memory. Beautiful girl. Not just in looks, though she was prettier than a spring morning. Beautiful in spirit. She loved those babies before they were even born, talked to them every day, sang to them, made plans for their future. What kind of plans? Grace glanced around, as if making sure they were alone. "She wrote them letters, Miss Lucy. 36 letters, one for each birthday until they turned 18. She had this premonition, you see. Worried something might happen during delivery." Lucy's heart clenched. "Where are the letters?" "Hidden. Mr. Robert, after she died, he couldn't bear any reminders. He boxed everything up, but I—" Grace looked ashamed. "I couldn't let him throw away her final gifts to her children. Grace, those letters could change everything. I know, child, but he's not ready. The pain is still too fresh." That evening, after Robert had successfully fed and bathed both babies, a milestone that would have seemed impossible a week ago, Lucy found him in his study, staring at his laptop but not really working. "They're beautiful sleepers," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "They get that from Anna. She could sleep through anything." Robert's voice was wistful rather than bitter. "Progress. Tell me more about her." Robert looked up, surprised. For months, no one had dared mention Anna's name around him. She was radiant. Everything she touched became more beautiful just because she cared about it. This house, the garden, even my business improved when she took an interest. He smiled slightly. She had this way of making the impossible seem effortless. "She sounds like she was meant to be a mother." She was. From the moment we found out she was pregnant, she threw herself into planning for the babies. She read every book, prepared every detail, chose every piece of furniture in their room. His expression darkened. "I can't even go in there anymore. Can't bear to see all her hopes and dreams mocked by—" "By what?" "By the fact that she's not here to see them fulfilled." Lucy leaned forward. "Robert, what if I told you that Anna found a way to be here? To still be part of their lives?" He looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "Grief makes us think death is the end of love, but what if it's just the beginning of a different kind of presence?" Before Robert could respond, Grace appeared in the doorway, holding an ornate brass key. "Mr. Robert," she said quietly, "it's time." Robert stood, alarmed. "Grace, what—" "There are things Anna left for her children, things you need to see." Grace's voice was firm with resolve. "Miss Lucy is right. Grief doesn't have to mean goodbye forever." Robert's face went white. I can't go back to that room." "You won't be alone," Lucy said, standing beside him. "We'll be with you." "The babies are sleeping peacefully," Grace finished. "They're safe, Mr. Robert. But they deserve to know who their mother was, and you deserve to remember her as more than just the woman who died giving them life." Robert looked between the two women who had become his anchors in the storm of grief. In Grace's hand, the brass key seemed to glow with possibility. "She left them letters," Grace said softly. 36 letters, one for every birthday." The words hit Robert like a revelation. Even facing death, Anna had found a way to mother their children. The realization that her love had been stronger than her fear, that she'd planned for their future even while facing her own mortality, overwhelmed him. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew, and she prepared. She trusted you to help them receive her gifts when the time was right." Robert extended his hand toward the key, then pulled back. "What if I'm not ready?" "You are," Lucy said with quiet certainty. "Anna wouldn't have left those letters unless she believed you'd be strong enough to share them." With trembling fingers, Robert took the key. It was warm from Grace's hand, as if it had been waiting all this time for this moment. "Will you come with me?" he asked Lucy. "Of course." Together, the three of them climbed the stairs to the second floor, stopping before a door that had remained locked for 8 months. Robert slid the key into the lock, turned it slowly and pushed open the door to his past. What waited inside would change everything. The master suite took Robert's breath away. Preserved exactly as Anna had left it, the room seemed suspended in time, waiting for her return. Afternoon sunlight streamed through sheer curtains, illuminating dust motes that danced like memories in the golden air. Anna's reading glasses still sat on the nightstand beside a pregnancy journal, open to her final entry. Robert stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed by the assault of memories. Anna's perfume seemed to linger in the air, her presence so tangible he almost expected to see her emerging from the walk-in closet, with that radiant smile that had lit up every room she entered. "It's like she just stepped out," Lucy whispered, her voice reverent in the sacred space. Grace moved purposefully to the window seat, where Anna had spent countless hours reading pregnancy books and talking to her unborn sons. She pressed a hidden panel, and a section of the built-in storage opened to reveal a wooden chest, intricately carved with roses and vines. "She had this made special," Grace explained, her voice thick with emotion. "Wanted something beautiful to hold her most precious gifts." Robert approached slowly, as if the chest might disappear if he moved too quickly. The wood was warm to the touch, polished to a lustrous shine that reflected his face like a mirror. 36 letters, he asked. One for every birthday until they turn 18, plus a special letter for their wedding days and the birth of their first children. Grace's eyes sparkled with tears. She thought of everything. With shaking hands, Robert lifted the lid. Inside, carefully organized and tied with silk ribbons, were dozens of envelopes, each marked with dates and occasions. But it was the topmost letter that stopped his heart, addressed simply to "My beloved Robert." "She wrote to you too," Lucy said softly. Robert lifted the envelope as if it contained something infinitely precious and fragile. His name was written in Anna's elegant script, the same handwriting that had left notes in his lunch and love letters in his briefcase throughout their marriage. "I can't," he whispered. What if she blames you?" Lucy finished gently. "What if she's angry? What if her final words are filled with recrimination?" Robert nodded, unable to speak. "Then you'll finally hear her voice again," Lucy said. "And maybe you'll discover that love speaks differently than grief imagines." Grace and Lucy stepped back, giving Robert privacy for this most intimate reunion. He sat on the edge of the bed where he and Anna had shared their dreams and fears, where they'd planned their future and discussed baby names deep into the night. With infinite care, he opened the envelope and unfolded 2 pages of Anna's handwriting. Her voice seemed to whisper in his ear as he read, "My dearest Robert, if you're reading this, then our greatest fear has come to pass, and I'm no longer with you to see our beautiful children grow. But I need you to know that even facing this possibility, I have no regrets. Every moment of loving you, every day of carrying our sons, every dream we shared was worth whatever price I paid. I know you, my darling. I know you'll blame yourself, blame them, blame God. But I need you to hear this. Our children are not the reason I'm gone. They are the reason I lived fully, loved completely, and died fulfilled. They are our love made flesh, our dreams given form." By now, Grace has probably told you about the letters. Each one contains everything I wanted to say to John and Gabriel at different stages of their lives. But more than that, they contain my faith in you, my absolute certainty that you will be the father they need, even without me there to help. Robert, you must forgive yourself. You must forgive our sons. They need your love, not your guilt. They need to hear stories about their mother that celebrate her life, not mourn her death. And someday, when you're ready, they need to meet the woman who will love them as I would have, not as a replacement for me, but as a continuation of the family we began. I'm not gone, my love. I'm in every laugh they share, every milestone they reach, every moment of joy you give them. Death cannot diminish love. It can only transform it. Love them enough for both of us. That's all I ask. Forever yours, Anna. Robert's vision blurred as tears coursed down his cheeks. But these weren't the bitter tears of grief he'd shed for months. These were tears of release, of forgiveness, of love reclaimed. "She knew," he said aloud, his voice cracking with emotion. "She knew I'd lose my way, and she left me a map back to our children." Grace and Lucy approached cautiously, finding Robert transformed. The hard lines of grief had softened, replaced by something resembling peace. "What else is in there?" he asked, gesturing to the chest. Grace smiled through her tears. Everything she wanted them to have: photo albums, family recipes, the lullabies her grandmother sang to her, even a recording of her reading children's stories made during her 7th month when she was on bed rest. She recorded herself reading to them every night for 2 weeks, said even if she couldn't be there, her voice could still comfort them. Robert looked at Lucy with wonder. "You knew, didn't you? You knew there was more than just my guilt keeping us apart." "I suspected. Children need more than just their father's love. They need to know where they came from, who their mother was, what she dreamed for them." "Will you help me?" Robert asked. "Will you help me give them Anna's gifts?" "Every single one," Lucy promised. As if summoned by the restoration of love in the house, the baby monitor crackled to life with the sound of John and Gabriel waking from their nap. But instead of crying, they were babbling happily, as if they could sense the shift in their father's heart. "They're ready for their first letter," Grace said, wiping her eyes. Robert stood, clutching Anna's letter to his chest. For the first time in 8 months, he felt worthy of being their father. "Then let's go tell them about their mother." Together they descended to the nursery, carrying with them the beginning of healing and the promise that love truly is stronger than death. That evening, the nursery glowed with soft lamplight as Robert settled into the rocking chair, with both babies cradled in his arms. Lucy and Grace sat nearby, witnesses to this sacred moment of reunion between a father and his children's legacy. The first letter, marked for John and Gabriel's first Christmas, was written on cream-colored paper with Anna's elegant script. Robert's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it, but his voice was steady as he began to read aloud. "My precious sons," he began, and both babies turned toward the sound, as if recognizing something familiar. "Today, you are 8 months old, though I always imagined reading this to you on Christmas morning when you were 1. If your father is reading this to you, it means I couldn't be there myself. But please know that every word comes from a heart overflowing with love for you both." Robert paused, emotion catching in his throat. Grace reached over and gently touched his shoulder, encouraging him to continue. "John and Gabriel, you were born from the deepest love your father and I shared. From the moment we learned you were growing inside me, you became the center of our universe. We spent months preparing for you, dreaming about who you might become, planning all the adventures we'd share as a family." As Robert read, something magical happened. The babies, usually fussy at this hour, grew perfectly still, their eyes fixed on their father's face as if drinking in every word. "I want you to know about your daddy. He is the kindest, strongest, most wonderful man I've ever known. When he finds out you're joining our family, he cried tears of joy. He spent weeks building your cribs with his own hands, painting your room 3 different shades of blue until he found the perfect one. Every night, he would talk to you while you were in my belly, telling you about all the places he wanted to take you, all the things he wanted to teach you." Robert's voice broke slightly. "Did I really do all that?" "Every bit of it," Grace confirmed. "You were so excited, Mr. Robert. You read more pregnancy books than Anna did." Lucy smiled. "Keep reading. And I want you to know about me, too. I grew up in this very house with my grandmother, who taught me that love is the only thing that truly lasts. She used to say that every baby is born carrying the hopes and dreams of all the people who love them. You carry mine, your daddy's, and your great-grandmother's too." The letter went on to describe family traditions Anna wanted them to know: Christmas morning pancakes shaped like stars, Easter egg hunts in the back garden, the way their great-grandmother always hung stockings for every member of the family, even the family dog. "On Christmas morning," Robert continued reading, "I want you to know that somewhere, somehow I'm watching you tear open your presents with the same excitement I felt watching ultrasound images of you moving in my belly. So I'm there when you taste your first Christmas cookie, when you help Daddy put ornaments on the tree, when you fall asleep to the sound of Christmas carols." As Robert read the final paragraphs, both babies had grown drowsy, lulled by their father's voice and perhaps by some deeper recognition of their mother's love reaching across the divide between life and death. "Love is not limited by presence, my darlings. It transcends time and space, and even death itself. Every time your father hugs you, you're feeling my arms too. Every time he tells you he loves you, you're hearing my voice too. We are your parents, together, always." The letter was signed simply Mama, with 2 small hearts drawn beside it. Robert folded the letter carefully, his hands no longer shaking. "She really is still here, isn't she?" "She never left," Lucy said softly. "Love doesn't die, Robert. It just changes form." Gabriel had fallen asleep in his father's arms, but John was still awake, staring up at Robert with those eyes that were so much like Anna's. "What do you think, little man?" Robert whispered to his son. "Ready to hear more about your mama?" John gurgled softly, one tiny hand reaching up to touch his father's face. "I think that's a yes," Grace said, wiping tears from her cheeks. Over the next hour, they explored more of the chest's contents. There were photos of Anna throughout her pregnancy, her hands resting lovingly on her growing belly. There was a playlist of songs she'd sung to the babies before they were born. There was even a small stuffed elephant that had been Anna's own as a child, saved specially for her future children. She thought of everything, Robert marveled, holding the worn stuffed elephant. How did she know exactly what they'd need? "Mothers always know," Grace said. "It's a gift that comes with the job." Lucy picked up a small jewelry box from the chest. Inside were 2 identical silver lockets, each engraved with one baby's name. "These are beautiful," she breathed. "She wanted them to have something of hers to carry always," Grace explained. "Inside are photos of her holding them right after they were born. The only photos—" Robert's throat tightened. Those were the last photos taken of Anna alive, moments before the complications that would take her life began. "We'll save these for when they're older," he decided, "when they can understand what they mean." As they carefully repacked the precious items, Robert felt something shift inside him. The crushing weight of guilt that had pressed down on him for 8 months was lifting, replaced by something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. "Lucy," he said suddenly, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." She looked at him expectantly. "Do you think Anna would approve of the man I've become since she died?" Lucy considered the question carefully. "I think Anna would understand the man you became in grief, but she'd be proud of the man you're becoming in healing." "What do you mean?" "Grief is love with nowhere to go. But tonight, you found somewhere to put it. You gave it back to your children where it belongs." Robert looked down at his sleeping sons, both now peaceful in his arms. For the first time since Anna's death, he could see her in their faces without pain. "Tomorrow," he said, "I want to start reading them all her letters, not just on special occasions, but whenever they need to hear her voice." "And what about you?" Lucy asked gently. "When do you need to hear her voice?" Robert smiled, the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him in months. "I just did." Outside, Atlanta sparkled in the distance, but inside the nursery, a family was being rebuilt, one letter, one memory, one moment of love at a time. Anna's greatest gift wasn't just her letters, it was her faith that love could survive anything, even death itself. 2 weeks later, the Miller house had transformed into something Anna would have recognized, a home filled with laughter, purpose, and the kind of organized chaos that comes with caring for twins. Robert had taken indefinite leave from his company, finally prioritizing his children over corporate obligations that suddenly seemed insignificant. "Mr. Robert, you're going to spoil them rotten," Grace laughed as she watched him carefully arrange John and Gabriel's breakfast. Organic bananas mashed into perfect star shapes, just as Anna had described in one of her letters. "Anna wrote that babies should know meals are made with love, not just convenience," Robert replied, adding a tiny sprinkle of cinnamon to each bowl. "Besides, I have 8 months of father meals to make up for." Lucy entered the kitchen carrying a squealing Gabriel, who had discovered the joy of pulling hair and was proudly displaying a fistful of her auburn curls. "Someone's discovered his grip strength," she announced, gently extracting her hair from Gabriel's determined fist. "That's Anna's hair-pulling gene," Grace said with a grin. "She used to grab onto things so tight as a baby. We joked she'd grow up to be a wrestler." These moments of connection to Anna had become precious gifts. Instead of avoiding memories of his wife, Robert now collected them greedily, each story adding another layer to the picture his sons would have of their mother. The morning routine had become a sacred ritual. While Grace prepared breakfast, Lucy helped Robert dress the babies in coordinated outfits that Anna had carefully selected and labeled with notes like, "For when they're big enough to sit up," and perfect for tummy-time adventures. But it was the evening routine that had become truly magical. After baths and bottles, Robert would settle into the nursery's rocking chair with both babies and read from Anna's letters or play recordings of her voice. The babies responded to these sessions with rapt attention, as if they were receiving messages from a beloved friend they couldn't quite remember but somehow knew. "Tonight's letter is special," Robert announced, as Lucy and Grace joined him in the nursery. "It's about family traditions." He opened an envelope marked, "For when they start to understand the world around them," and began to read in the gentle voice he'd perfected over the past 2 weeks. "My darling boys, every family needs traditions that bind them together across generations. These aren't just activities, they're the threads that weave the fabric of who we are." The letter described Sunday morning pancake breakfasts with Grace's famous buttermilk recipe, bedtime stories read by lamplight, and weekly visits to feed ducks at Piedmont Park. But it also described traditions Anna had invented specifically for her sons. "Every year on your birthday, we'll plant something new in the garden so you can watch it grow as you do. Every Christmas Eve, we'll drive around Atlanta looking at holiday lights while singing carols. And every Sunday evening, we'll have what I call gratitude time, when we'll share 3 things that made us happy that week." She really thought about the long term, Lucy marveled. Anna believed childhood should be magical, Grace added. She wanted every day to have some small wonder in it. As Robert continued reading, describing elaborate Easter egg hunts and Halloween costume traditions, both babies began their usual evening fussiness. But instead of escalating into full crying sessions, they seemed to settle as Anna's words washed over them. "The most important tradition," Robert read, "is saying I love you every single day. Not just at bedtime or when parting, but randomly, frequently, abundantly. I want my boys to never doubt, even for a moment, that they are cherished beyond measure." Gabriel yawned widely, and John's eyes had grown heavy with approaching sleep. "And finally," Robert's voice grew soft and tender, "I want you to know that love creates its own traditions. As you grow, you'll find new ways to honor the people you care about. You might carry forward some of these traditions, modify others, and create entirely new ones. That's not just okay. It's exactly what family should do. We build on the past while creating our own future." As Robert finished the letter, both babies had surrendered to sleep. The nursery fell into peaceful quiet, broken only by the gentle sounds of steady breathing. "She knew exactly what they'd need to hear," Lucy said softly. "She knew exactly what I'd need to hear too," Robert replied. "For months, I thought honoring Anna meant preserving everything exactly as she left it. But she's telling me the opposite, that the best way to honor her is to build on what she started." Grace nodded knowingly. "That woman always was wiser than her years." "I want to start implementing these traditions tomorrow," Robert decided. "Sunday pancakes, gratitude time, all of it." "Even the garden planting?" Lucy asked. "Especially the garden planting. Anna loved flowers. She'd spend hours working in the rose garden behind the house." Robert's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "Would you help me prepare it? I want to plant something special for their first birthday in February." "Of course, but what would you plant in winter?" Grace smiled. "Bulbs. Spring bulbs that will bloom exactly on their birthday. Anna would love that. Hope planted in darkness, beauty emerging after the hardest season." As they quietly left the sleeping babies and headed downstairs, Robert felt something he hadn't experienced since Anna's death. Excitement about the future. Not despite his children, but because of them. "Lucy," he said as they reached the kitchen, "I need to ask you something important." She turned, curious. "These letters, these traditions, this whole new life we're building, would you consider staying permanently? Not just as an employee, but as part of our family?" Lucy's eyes filled with tears. "Robert, I know it's a lot to ask. You have your own life, your own dreams. But what we've built here, what Anna envisioned, it needs someone who understands what real family looks like. And you've given us back something I thought we'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope," Robert said simply. "Hope that love is stronger than loss, that family can be chosen as well as born, that Anna's dreams for our children can still come true." Lucy looked around the kitchen where Grace was humming, while preparing formula for the night feeding, where baby toys were scattered on clean counters, where family photos once again held places of honor. "Yes," she said finally. Yes, I'll stay. These boys need to grow up knowing they're surrounded by people who love them unconditionally. Grace clapped her hands together with joy. Oh, this is exactly what Anna would have wanted. Family isn't just blood, it's the people who choose to love you every single day. As if summoned by the promise of permanent family, gentle babbling drifted down from the nursery. Not crying, but the soft sounds of children who know they're safe and cherished. They're dreaming, Robert said, listening to the sweet sounds. They're planning, Grace corrected with a knowing smile, just like their mama did, planning all the love they're going to give and receive. That night, for the first time since Anna's death, Robert Miller fell asleep not to the sound of crying, but to the gentle whisper of hope being reborn in his heart. Tomorrow would bring new traditions, new moments of joy, and new letters from a mother whose love had proven stronger than death itself. Spring arrived early in Atlanta that year, bringing with it a sense of renewal that seemed to permeate every corner of the Miller household. The twins, now 13 months old, were walking with determination if not grace, toddling around the house with infectious enthusiasm and leaving chaos in their wake. "Gabriel, no," Lucy laughed, scooping up the adventurous twin just before he could pull a lamp off the end table. "We've talked about this. Lamps are for lighting, not climbing." Gabriel grinned at her with 4 tiny teeth and immediately reached for her earrings, his new favorite target. John, meanwhile, had discovered the fascinating world of kitchen cabinets and was systematically removing every pot and pan within reach. "They're definitely Anna's boys," Grace observed, watching the morning destruction with amused tolerance. She was into everything as a child, drove her grandmother to distraction with her curiosity. Robert emerged from his study, having successfully concluded a conference call with his business partners. The company was thriving under the new management structure he'd implemented, allowing him to work primarily from home while remaining involved in major decisions. "How are my little tornadoes this morning?" he asked, sweeping John into his arms just as the toddler discovered the exciting potential of banging pot lids together. "Busy discovering the world," Lucy replied, settling Gabriel in his high chair, just like their mother wanted. It had been 7 months since that transformative night when they'd opened Anna's chest of letters, and the changes in all of them were profound. Robert had evolved from a grief-stricken recluse into an engaged, loving father who found joy in every milestone his sons reached. The business continued to prosper, but it no longer defined his identity. "Are we still planning to work in the garden today?" Robert asked, buckling John into his matching high chair. "Absolutely," Lucy said, wiping banana from Gabriel's face. "The bulbs we planted for their birthday are gorgeous, and Anna's rose garden is ready for spring planting." The garden had become Robert's passion project. Following Anna's detailed plans found among her papers, he'd spent the winter preparing beds and ordering the specific varieties she'd dreamed of growing. Every Sunday, weather permitting, the whole family would spend hours outdoors, with the twins playing on blankets while the adults worked among the flowers. "Today's special," Grace announced, bringing out a sealed envelope marked for their first steps in the garden. "Miss Anna left instructions for this day, too." Robert accepted the letter with the reverence these messages had earned. Even after reading dozens of them, each one still felt like a gift from beyond. "Should I read it now or save it for outside?" he asked. "Outside," Lucy decided. "In Anna's rose garden, where she meant it to be read." An hour later, they were all settled in the backyard garden, the twins contentedly exploring grass and flower petals while Robert opened Anna's latest message to them. "My precious gardeners," he began, his voice carrying easily in the spring air. "If you're reading this, it means you've taken your first real steps into the garden we planned together. By now, you've probably discovered that flowers and plants are much more interesting when you can touch them, smell them, and yes, probably taste them too." Gabriel looked up at the word taste, as if he'd been caught in the act of sampling a tulip petal. "Gardens teach us about patience, about nurturing, about the miracle of growth from tiny seeds into beautiful blooms. But more than that, they teach us about continuity, how beauty can persist across seasons, how something planted with love in one year can bring joy for many years to come." Robert paused, looking around at the garden that was indeed coming to life exactly as Anna had envisioned. Daffodils and tulips bloomed in carefully planned clusters, while rose bushes showed the first tender green of new growth. "I want you to know that this garden is yours now." Every flower, every tree, every carefully planned bed is part of your inheritance, not of money or possessions, but of beauty and wonder. As you grow, I hope you'll add your own plants, your own vision, your own love to what we started. The letter went on to describe specific plants and their meanings: the white roses for pure love, the lavender for devotion, the herbs for healing and nourishment. Anna had created not just a garden, but a living library of symbolism and intention. And someday, Robert continued reading, when you have children of your own, I hope you'll bring them here to play among the flowers their great-grandmother planted before they were born. Love planted in earth grows in ways we never expect. As Robert finished the letter, John toddled over to the rosebed and pointed at a particularly beautiful white bloom, babbling excitedly. I think he approves, Lucy said, lifting John so he could smell the flower safely. Anna would be so proud, Grace murmured, wiping tears from her eyes. Look at this place, it's exactly what she dreamed it would be. They spent the rest of the morning planting new additions to the garden, sunflowers that would tower over the twins by summer's end, a small herb garden with basil and mint for cooking, and a special patch designated for the boys to plant whatever caught their fancy as they grew older. This is their first real memory, Robert realized, watching Gabriel attempt to eat a handful of soil while John tried to water the same plant Lucy was working on. Their first spring, their first garden day. The first of many, Lucy agreed. Anna made sure of that. As the sun reached its zenith, they spread blankets for an impromptu picnic among the flowers. Grace had packed sandwiches and fresh strawberries, while the twins shared a container of Cheerios and fascination with a butterfly that kept landing just out of reach. I have something to tell you all, Robert said, as they relaxed in the shade of Anna's favorite oak tree. I've made a decision about the business. Lucy and Grace looked at him with interest. I'm stepping back to a consulting role permanently. Andrew Davis is more than capable of running day-to-day operations, and frankly, I'd rather be here watching my sons discover the world than in boardrooms discussing profit margins. Are you sure? Lucy asked. You've worked so hard to build that company. I built it to provide for my family, Robert replied, watching John chase a soap bubble Grace had blown. But family isn't just about financial security. It's about presence, about being there for the moments that matter. Anna knew that. It's why she left so many specific instructions for experiences, not just inheritance. Grace nodded approvingly. Miss Anna always said the best gift you can give a child is your attention. Besides, Robert added with a grin, someone needs to supervise these two gardeners. I have a feeling they're going to keep us very busy. As if on cue, Gabriel discovered the sprinkler and squealed with delight as he toddled through the gentle spray, soaking himself and everything nearby. John, not to be outdone, attempted to catch the water in his tiny hands, resulting in more soaking and more squealing. Bath time moved up to 2 p.m., Lucy announced, laughing at their soggy charges. And nap time too, Grace added. All this fresh air and excitement will have them sleeping like angels. As they gathered their supplies and herded the twins toward the house, Robert took one last look at the garden in full bloom. Anna's vision had become reality, a space where love grew alongside flowers, where their children would learn about beauty, patience, and the miracle of new life emerging from what seemed like empty earth. Thank you, he whispered to the wind, knowing somehow that Anna could hear him. Thank you for showing us how to bloom again. Inside the house, bath time became another adventure, with more water on the adults than the children. But as Robert tucked his clean, exhausted sons into their cribs for afternoon naps, he felt the deep satisfaction that comes from a day well lived. Story time? Lucy asked, settling into the nursery's reading chair. Anna's voice today, Robert decided, selecting a recording from their growing collection. The one about the seasons. As Anna's voice filled the room through the small speaker, telling a story about flowers that sleep in winter and wake up in spring, both boys settled into peaceful rest. Her words seemed to wrap around them like a gentle embrace, proof that love truly knows no boundaries, not even death. Outside their window, the garden bloomed in the afternoon sun, a living testament to the power of planning for joy, planting with hope, and trusting that love will find a way to flourish no matter what storms it weathers. By autumn, the Miller household had settled into rhythms that would have made Anna proud. The twins, now walking with confidence and chattering in their own mysterious language, had transformed the house into a playground of discovery and delight. Every room bore evidence of their presence: toy trucks in the study, building blocks in the kitchen, and a trail of picture books that followed their explorations throughout the day. "Dada! Dada!" Gabriel called from his high chair, waving a piece of toast like a victory flag. At 15 months, both boys had mastered several words, but Dada remained their favorite, especially when they wanted something. "Yes, Gabriel, I see your breakfast," Robert replied, wiping jam from John's face before it could migrate to the white kitchen cabinets. But pointing and shouting won't make it taste any different. Lucy entered carrying a basket of laundry, pausing to kiss the top of each twin's head in the casual affection that had become second nature. She'd officially moved into the house 6 months ago, taking the guest suite that Grace had transformed into a cozy apartment, complete with its own sitting area and kitchenette. "Mail's here," she announced, setting several packages on the counter, including something special. Grace looked up from the stove where she was preparing the twins' afternoon snacks. The photographer, Lucy confirmed with a smile. They'd commissioned a professional photographer to capture the boys at various milestones throughout their first year, following Anna's detailed instructions about preserving memories. The latest session had taken place in the garden, with John and Gabriel playing among the fall flowers while Robert read to them from a picture book. "Let's see them tonight after the boys are asleep," Robert decided. "I want to add them to Anna's albums properly." This had become another treasured ritual, updating the photo albums Anna had started during her pregnancy, adding pictures of milestones she'd anticipated, and documenting the life she'd envisioned for her sons. Each page was labeled in Robert's careful handwriting, ensuring the boys would someday understand the continuity between their mother's dreams and their father's devotion. The afternoon passed in typical chaos. John discovered he could make fascinating echoes by shouting into empty cardboard boxes, while Gabriel developed an obsession with unrolling toilet paper throughout the house. Lucy found herself playing defense against a coordinated twin assault on household order, while Robert worked in his study on a consulting project that would help fund the boys' future education. But it was during evening story time that the day's most significant moment occurred. "Tonight we have 2 special letters," Robert announced as they gathered in the nursery. "One for your 15-month milestone, and one that Anna marked as extra special." He opened the first envelope, labeled "When They Start to Really Communicate," and began to read in the gentle voice that had become associated with these sacred moments. "My chattering boys, by now you've probably discovered the magic of words and the power of making your needs known. You might be saying mama and dada, and maybe a few other special words that make everyone smile." Both boys had indeed mastered mama, though they seemed to use it primarily when they were upset or seeking comfort, as if some deep instinct connected the word with solace. "Language is one of humanity's greatest gifts," Robert continued, "but remember that communication is about more than words. It's about listening with your heart, speaking with kindness, and understanding that sometimes the most important things are said without any words at all." The letter went on to describe the importance of reading, the joy of storytelling, and Anna's hope that her sons would grow up to be compassionate communicators who used their voices to heal rather than harm. As Robert finished the first letter, he reached for the second envelope. This one was marked, "For when they need to know how much," and sealed with extra care. "This one's different," he said softly, showing Lucy and Grace the envelope. "Heavier paper, special seal." She wanted to make sure this message survived. With reverent care, he opened the envelope and unfolded what appeared to be a longer letter written on cream-colored stationery with decorative borders. "My beloved John and Gabriel," Robert began, his voice already thick with emotion. "I'm writing this on the day we learned you were both boys, when you were still growing safely inside me. I've been saving the most important words for this letter, the ones I need you to carry in your hearts always." He paused, overwhelmed by the weight of Anna's final, most crucial message to their children. "I need you to understand something that your father might struggle to tell you as you grow up. Your mother's death was not your fault. Not in any way, not for any reason, not even in the smallest degree. You are not a tragedy, you are a triumph. You are not the reason I died. You are the reason I lived so fully." Tears began streaming down Robert's face, but he continued reading steadily. "Some people might tell you different stories as you get older. They might say that childbirth is dangerous, that having you cost too much, that love shouldn't require such sacrifice. But I want you to know the truth. Every moment of carrying you, every day of planning for you, every dream I had about who you'd become was worth whatever price I paid. Lucy reached over and took Robert's hand, lending him strength to continue. You were wanted beyond measure. You were planned with joy. You were anticipated with excitement. Every piece of furniture in your room, every toy I selected, every song I sang to you before you were born, was chosen with love, so deep it took my breath away. Gabriel, who had been playing quietly with his stuffed elephant, suddenly looked up at his father's voice, as if sensing the importance of this moment. I need you to know that love is not diminished by loss. The love I have for you didn't die with me. It multiplied, spread out through every person who cares for you, every hand that holds you, every voice that sings you to sleep. I am in your father's lullabies, in Grace's cooking, in the garden we planned together, in every moment of joy you'll experience growing up. Robert's voice cracked, but he pressed on. And someday, when you're grown and perhaps have children of your own, I need you to remember this. Love is always worth the risk. Family is always worth the sacrifice. Joy is always worth the sorrow that makes it precious. I would choose you again, my darling boys, every single time. The letter concluded with Anna's most personal message to each twin individually, specific hopes and dreams tailored to their unique personalities as she'd imagined them during pregnancy. For John, she wrote about his gentle spirit and natural empathy. For Gabriel, she described his adventurous nature and infectious joy. As Robert finished reading, the nursery fell into profound silence. Both babies had grown still, as if absorbing the weight of their mother's words. Grace was crying openly, and Lucy's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She knew, Robert whispered finally. She knew exactly what they'd need to hear, exactly when they'd need to hear it. What do we do with this? Lucy asked softly. How do we make sure they never forget it? We read it to them every year on this date, Robert decided. November 15th, their personal Mother's Day, when we celebrate Anna's love for them specifically. Grace nodded emphatically. And we make copies, multiple copies, so they can have their own when they're older. And we live it, Robert added, looking down at his sons with profound love. We make sure every day of their lives reflects the truth Anna wrote in this letter, that they are wanted, cherished, and worth every sacrifice. As they settled the twins into their cribs for the night, Robert felt something shift inside him. The last remnants of guilt and blame finally released their hold on his heart, replaced by an unshakable certainty that Anna's love had been strong enough to guide them all toward healing. "Thank you," he whispered into the darkness, knowing Anna could hear him. "Thank you for loving us enough to plan for this moment, for knowing exactly what we'd need to find our way back to joy." Outside, autumn wind rustled through the trees Anna had planted, and inside the nursery, two little boys slept peacefully, wrapped in the absolute certainty of their mother's love, a love so powerful it had reached across death itself to heal their family and set them free. Christmas morning arrived with the soft hush of Atlanta's first snow in 3 years, blanketing the Miller mansion in pristine white that made everything look like a fairy tale. At 19 months old, John and Gabriel had discovered the concept of excitement and were demonstrating it with enthusiastic babbling and determined attempts to escape their cribs to investigate the mysterious packages that had appeared overnight under the tree. "Presents! Presents!" Gabriel shouted, his vocabulary having expanded dramatically over the past month. John, more methodical in his approach to communication, pointed solemnly at the tree and announced, "Big, big." "Yes, it's very big," Robert agreed, lifting both boys from their cribs simultaneously, a skill he'd mastered through necessity. "And yes, there are presents. But first, breakfast and Christmas story." This had become their tradition on special days. Breakfast together as a family, followed by the appropriate letter from Anna, then whatever celebration the day called for. Grace had prepared cinnamon rolls shaped like stars, just as Anna had described in her Christmas traditions letter, while Lucy arranged the boys' special Christmas outfits, red sweaters knitted by Grace with each twin's name embroidered on the front. "Someone's excited," Lucy laughed as Gabriel attempted to climb down from his high chair before finishing his breakfast. "The presents aren't going anywhere, Sweet Pea." "Mama presents?" John asked, having learned that important things often involved their mama somehow. "Yes, baby," Robert said gently. "Mama left presents for your first real Christmas." This was true in the most literal sense. Among Anna's carefully preserved gifts were items specifically marked for the twins' first Christmas, when they'd be old enough to understand the magic of the holiday. The anticipation of sharing these final gifts with his sons filled Robert with bittersweet joy. After breakfast, they gathered in the living room where the Christmas tree sparkled with ornaments Anna had collected during her pregnancy. Each one told a story: a pair of tiny booties for baby's first Christmas, angels with the boys' names painted in gold script, and a beautiful star that had belonged to Anna's grandmother. "Today we have a very special letter," Robert announced, settling into his favorite chair with both boys on his lap. "This one is marked for their first Christmas magic." He opened the envelope carefully, noting that Anna had used special holiday paper and tied the letter with a red ribbon. "My Christmas angels," Robert began, his voice warm with love and anticipation. "Today you're experiencing the wonder of Christmas for the first time. Not as babies who sleep through the excitement, but as little people who can touch and explore and discover the magic we've prepared for you." Gabriel reached for the letter, fascinated by the ribbon, while John settled against his father's chest with the patient attention he showed during story time. Christmas isn't about the presents, though those are certainly fun. It's about love made visible, about the joy of giving and receiving, about the miracle of family gathered together to celebrate all the ways we're blessed. The letter went on to describe specific traditions Anna wanted the boys to experience: hanging stockings together, leaving cookies for Santa, singing carols by the tree. But more importantly, it talked about the spiritual significance of Christmas as a celebration of love, conquering all obstacles. "Every ornament on our tree tells a story of love," Robert continued reading. "Every tradition we practice connects you to generations of family who came before, and every gift you give or receive is a reminder that love multiplies when it's shared." As Robert finished the letter, Grace appeared with a large wrapped box marked, "From Mama with Love." "She wrapped this herself," Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. "Made me promise to save it for their first real Christmas morning." Inside the box were treasures that took everyone's breath away: 2 matching rocking horses carved from beautiful wood, each with a brass nameplate and a small envelope attached to the saddle. "Horses!" Gabriel exclaimed, immediately attempting to climb onto his. "Careful, sweetheart." Lucy guided him safely onto the rocking horse, which was perfectly sized for a toddler. "Let's see what Mama wrote about these." Robert opened John's envelope first, reading aloud, "For John, my gentle son, may this horse carry you on adventures in your imagination and teach you that sometimes the most wonderful journeys happen right at home." Gabriel's envelope contained a similar but personalized message. "For Gabriel, my joyful explorer, may this horse remind you that enthusiasm and wonder make every day an adventure worth taking." The morning continued with a parade. Full of perfectly chosen gifts, books Anna had selected for their developing minds, toys that encouraged creativity and exploration, and clothes in exactly the right sizes, with notes about when she'd imagined them wearing each outfit. But perhaps the most precious gift was found at the bottom of the Christmas box: a recording device with a note that read, "Press play when you need to hear Mama's voice on Christmas morning." Robert activated the device with trembling hands, and Anna's voice filled the room, singing Silent Night in the pure, sweet tone Grace remembered from countless evenings when Anna would sing while working in the kitchen. Both boys grew perfectly still, their attention completely captured by the voice they somehow recognized, despite having only heard it in utero. John reached toward the speaker, as if trying to touch the sound, while Gabriel's usual restlessness settled into peaceful listening. "She's here," Lucy whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's really here with us?" "She never left," Grace added, her own eyes bright with tears. "Love like that doesn't die. It just finds new ways to show itself." As Anna's voice filled the house with carols, they settled into Christmas morning magic. The boys explored their new toys with delight, occasionally looking up at the speaker as if checking to make sure their mama was still singing. Robert found himself relaxed and joyful in a way he hadn't experienced since Anna's death, finally able to celebrate rather than merely endure the holidays. "This is what she wanted," he said to Lucy, as they watched the twins playing together on the living room floor, surrounded by the evidence of Anna's love and foresight. Not sadness or longing, but joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "Look at them," Lucy replied, gesturing to John and Gabriel, who had discovered they could make their rocking horses race by rocking in synchrony. "They're not missing anything. They have everything they need. Their father's love, a home full of people who adore them, and a mother's presence that's so real they can hear her voice." The day unfolded like a perfect gift itself. They had Christmas dinner with Grace's extended family, who had become surrogate grandparents and aunts and uncles to the twins. Photos were taken to add to Anna's albums, and new traditions were born alongside the ones Anna had planned. But perhaps the most significant moment came that evening, as Robert was tucking the boys into their cribs after a day full of excitement and new experiences. "Mama sing," John said softly, looking toward the spot where they'd placed Anna's recording device. "Yes, Mama sings," Robert confirmed. "She sings because she loves you very much." "Love Mama," Gabriel added, his vocabulary still developing, but his meaning crystal clear. "Yes, we love Mama, and Mama loves us. And that love will always be with us, even when we can't see her." As he turned out the lights and activated Anna's recording of lullabies, Robert felt the profound satisfaction of a promise kept. Anna had trusted him to give their children Christmas magic, and he had delivered, not just the presents and traditions, but the deeper gift of knowing they were cherished beyond measure. Standing in the doorway, listening to Anna's voice sing their children to sleep, Robert finally understood the full magnitude of what his wife had accomplished. She hadn't just planned for their physical needs or their emotional development. She had engineered their healing, orchestrated their joy, and ensured that love would triumph over loss. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new milestones. But tonight, Christmas night, the Miller family was complete, held together not by presents but by love so powerful it had defeated death itself and given them all the gift of happiness restored. In the soft glow of the nursery nightlight, two little boys drifted off to sleep to the sound of their mother's voice, wrapped in the absolute certainty that they were loved, wanted, and cherished, the greatest Christmas gift any child could receive. February 15th arrived grey and somber, marking exactly 2 years since Anna's death and the twins' birth. But instead of the devastation that had characterized the first anniversary, the Miller household approached this day with a mixture of reverence and celebration that would have made Anna proud. "Today is Mama Day," John announced solemnly at breakfast, his 2-year-old vocabulary having expanded to include complex concepts he didn't fully understand, but somehow knew were important. "Yes, sweetheart," Robert confirmed, serving the boys their favorite blueberry pancakes shaped like hearts. "Today we celebrate Mama and remember how much she loved you both." Gabriel, less verbal but equally aware that this was a special day, pointed to the fresh white roses Robert had placed throughout the house, Anna's favorite flowers, now a symbol of remembrance and love rather than loss. The morning routine included elements that had become sacred rituals on February 15th. First, they visited Anna's room, which Robert had transformed from a shrine of grief into a living memorial of love. Her photos were displayed with joy rather than sorrow. Her clothes had been donated to help other new mothers, and her jewelry was carefully preserved for the boys to give to their own families someday. "Tell us about Mama," Gabriel requested, settling onto the window seat where Anna used to read. This had become the twins' favorite part of Mama Day, hearing stories about the woman who had loved them before they could love her back. Robert, Lucy, and Grace had developed a repertoire of tales that painted Anna as real and human rather than tragically perfect. "Mama loved to dance in the kitchen while cooking," Robert began, settling both boys beside him. "She'd turn on music and spin around while stirring soup, and sometimes she'd grab my hand and make me dance too, even though I'm terrible at it." "Did she dance with us?" John asked, patting his own belly. "Every night," Grace interjected, joining them on the window seat. "She'd put headphones on her tummy and play music for you boys, then dance around the room talking to you about what she was planning for your nursery." These stories had evolved over 2 years from painful memories into treasured family history. The boys absorbed every detail with the focused attention children reserve for stories about themselves, building an internal picture of a mother who was loving, funny, real, and eternally present in their lives. "Today we have a very special letter," Robert announced as they prepared for their traditional cemetery visit. The last letter, saved for your second birthday. The boys understood that some letters were more important than others, and they grew still with anticipation as Robert opened the envelope marked, "For their second birthday, my final gift." "My beautiful 2-year-old boys," Robert began, his voice steady despite the emotion he felt. "If you're hearing this letter, it means you've survived your most challenging years and are becoming real little people with personalities and preferences and wonderful, complicated hearts." The letter went on to describe Anna's hopes for who her sons would become, not specific careers or achievements, but character traits and values. She wrote about kindness, courage, curiosity, and the importance of loving deeply, despite the risk of loss. "I want you to know that your father is the best man I've ever known, and whatever kind of father he's become, I know it's exactly what you needed. Trust him, love him, and remember that he chose love over fear when he chose to keep you close to his heart." Robert paused, overwhelmed by Anna's faith in him and his amazement at how accurately she'd predicted their healing journey. "And I want you to know about the people who love you. By now you've probably discovered that family isn't just about who shares your blood, it's about who shares your heart. Treasure the people who choose to love you, who stay through the difficult times, who celebrate your joy as if it were their own." Both boys looked instinctively at Lucy, who had become as essential to their happiness as breathing. Her love for them was so complete, so natural, that they couldn't imagine life without her presence. "Finally," Robert continued, reading Anna's concluding words, "I want you to remember that love is always worth the risk. Someday you'll face loss, disappointment, heartbreak. That's part of being human. But don't let fear keep you from loving fully. The pain of loss is always smaller than the joy of love, and the love remains even when the person is gone." The letter was signed not just Mama, but Anna Parker Miller, who loved you before she knew you and will love you long after you remember her. After reading the letter, they made their annual pilgrimage to Oakland Cemetery, where Anna's grave was marked with a beautiful stone Robert had commissioned. The inscription read simply, "Anna Parker Miller, beloved wife and mother, her love lives on." But this year's visit was different from the devastating journey of the previous year. The boys brought drawings they'd made, abstract scribbles that represented flowers, hugs, and love. They chatted to Anna's gravestone as if she could hear them, sharing news about their rocking horses, their garden adventures, and their favorite foods. "Mama, I can run fast now," Gabriel announced proudly, demonstrating by racing between headstones with the fearless enthusiasm of a 2-year-old. "I can read stories," John added, though his reading consisted mainly of making up narratives to match picture book illustrations. Robert knelt beside the grave, no longer overwhelmed by guilt and grief, but filled with gratitude for the woman who had made their family possible. "We're okay, Anna," he said softly. "We're more than okay, we're happy. The boys are growing up to be exactly who you hoped they'd be, and we've built the family you dreamed of." As they prepared to leave the cemetery, Lucy approached Robert with an expression that suggested she had something important to say. "Robert, there's something I need to tell you, something I've been waiting for the right moment to share." He looked at her with concern. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about what Anna wrote in that last letter, about family being people who choose to love you, and I need you to know that I don't just love John and Gabriel, I love you too." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with 2 years of shared experience, mutual respect, and deep affection. "Lucy, I'm not asking for anything," she continued quickly. "I just needed you to know that what we've built here isn't just about the boys. It's about all of us choosing to be a family, choosing to love each other through everything." Robert looked at this remarkable woman who had saved his children, healed his heart, and become the center of their family's happiness. He thought about Anna's letter encouraging him to find love again, her certainty that their family could grow and change while honoring her memory. "Anna knew," he said finally. "Somehow she knew you'd come into our lives and make us whole again." "Does that scare you?" "It used to," Robert admitted. "I thought loving someone else would betray Anna's memory, but I've learned that love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It multiplies." As they walked back to the car, John and Gabriel racing ahead while Grace followed with patient amusement, Robert felt the profound peace that comes from understanding that some endings are actually beginnings in disguise. Anna's death had seemed like the end of everything good in his life, but it had actually been the catalyst for a different kind of love story, one where a grieving father learned to heal, where lonely children found their missing family, and where a young woman with a gift for understanding hearts found her true home. "Dada, Lucy, home now?" Gabriel called from the car, impatient to return to their world of toys and stories and endless adventures. "Yes, sweetheart," Robert replied, helping to buckle the boys into their car seats. "We're going home." As they drove away from the cemetery, Robert glanced in the rearview mirror at his sons, chattering happily about their day, and at Lucy, whose presence had made everything possible. Anna's love had brought them together, and now their love for each other would carry them forward into whatever future awaited. The healing was complete, but the love story was just beginning. 1 year later, on a perfect spring morning when the garden was in full bloom, and the twins were racing through the yard with the boundless energy of healthy 3-year-olds, Robert made a decision that would have made Anna smile with satisfaction. "Lucy," he called from the kitchen window, watching her referee a spirited disagreement between John and Gabriel about whose turn it was to water the flowers. "Could you come inside for a moment? There's something I want to show you." She looked up, pushing a strand of hair from her face and laughing as Gabriel attempted to hide behind a rose bush that was far too small to conceal a 3-year-old. "Give me just a second to prevent a garden war," she called back, diplomatically suggesting that both boys could water different sections of the flower bed. Crisis averted, she made her way into the kitchen where Robert stood beside the counter, holding an envelope she didn't recognize. "What's that?" she asked, accepting the glass of iced tea he offered her. "Anna's final letter, the one marked, 'For when love finds a way.'" Lucy's eyes widened. They had read dozens of Anna's letters over the past 3 years, but somehow she'd never seen this one. "She left instructions that I should only open it when I was ready to move forward, when I'd healed enough to honor her memory, by building new happiness rather than preserving old grief. And you think you're ready now?" Robert looked out the window at John and Gabriel, who had moved on from watering flowers to an elaborate game involving chasing butterflies and making sound effects Lucy couldn't identify. "I know I'm ready. More than that, I know what Anna would want me to do, and I finally have the courage to do it." With reverent care, he opened the envelope and unfolded 2 pages written in Anna's familiar script. The letter was dated during her 8th month of pregnancy, when she was on bed rest and had time to contemplate possibilities she hoped she'd never need to address. "My dearest Robert," he began reading aloud, "if you're reading this letter, it means several things have happened. You've survived your grief. You've learned to love our children the way they deserve, and most importantly, you've found someone who makes you want to build a future rather than just preserve a past." Lucy's breath caught in her throat. "I need you to know that this was always my greatest hope for you. Not that you'd mourn me forever, but that you'd heal completely and find love again. Real love. The kind that makes you excited about tomorrow instead of trapped by yesterday." Robert paused, looking at Lucy with an expression she'd never seen before. Vulnerability mixed with absolute certainty. "I've been watching you throughout this pregnancy, seeing how you interact with our unborn children, and I know that your capacity for love is too great to be satisfied by memory alone. You were meant to be a husband and father in the present tense, not just in the past tense." "Robert," Lucy whispered, but he held up a gentle hand, asking her to let him finish. "So when you find her, and I believe you will find her, because people with hearts like yours attract love like magnets, I want you to know that you have my blessing, my encouragement, and my absolute certainty that loving someone new doesn't diminish what we shared. It honors it." The letter continued with Anna's specific hopes for Robert's future happiness, her advice about introducing a new love to their children, and her insistence that the right woman would love John and Gabriel not as substitutes for the children she might have had, but as the specific, irreplaceable individuals they were. "Tell her thank you for me," Robert read, his voice growing thick with emotion. "Thank her for loving my children, for healing my husband, for becoming the missing piece that makes our family complete. Tell her that a mother's love recognizes another mother's heart, and I see hers clearly, even though we'll never meet." As Robert finished reading, Lucy realized she was crying, not from sadness but from the overwhelming recognition of being seen and accepted by a woman whose love had shaped every good thing in her life for the past 3 years. "She knew it would be you," Robert said softly, setting the letter aside and taking Lucy's hands in his. "Somehow she knew that the person who would save our family would be the person I'd fall in love with. How could she possibly know that? Because she understood that love calls to love, that hearts recognize each other, that the kind of person who could heal our pain would be the kind of person I couldn't help but adore. Through the window, they could see John and Gabriel building an elaborate castle in the sandbox Grace had installed last summer. Their laughter drifted through the air like music, the sound of children who had never known a day without love, security, and joy. "Lucy Carter," Robert said, dropping to one knee beside her chair, "will you marry me? Will you help me build the future Anna dreamed of? Will you be the mother John and Gabriel chose, the wife I never thought I'd be brave enough to want again?" The ring he offered was simple and beautiful, not a replacement for Anna's rings, which would always hold their sacred place, but something new that represented their unique love story. "Yes," Lucy whispered, then louder with joy and certainty. "Yes, absolutely yes." As Robert slipped the ring onto her finger, the back door burst open and John and Gabriel tumbled into the kitchen, covered in dirt and radiating excitement. "Dada! Lucy! Come see our castle!" Gabriel demanded, tugging on Robert's sleeve. "It has a princess room for Lucy," John added importantly, "and a daddy room for you, and rooms for us and Mrs. Grace, and even room for Mama's pictures." The boys stopped suddenly, noticing the adults' tears and emotional expressions. "Why crying?" Gabriel asked with 3-year-old directness. "Happy crying," Lucy explained, kneeling to their level. "Daddy asked me to marry him, which means we'll be a real family forever and always." "Weren't we already a family?" John asked, confused by distinctions that seemed unimportant to his young mind. "Yes, sweetheart, we were. But now it's official," Robert explained. "Now everyone will know that we belong together." "Good," Gabriel pronounced with satisfaction. "I like belonging together." Grace appeared in the kitchen doorway, having heard the commotion from her afternoon baking session. She took one look at Lucy's ring, Robert's expression, and the boys' excitement, and burst into tears of pure joy. "Oh, thank the Lord," she exclaimed, pulling everyone into a massive group hug. "Miss Anna must be dancing in heaven right now." That evening, after the boys were settled into bed with extra stories to celebrate the special day, Robert and Lucy sat in the garden Anna had planned, watching the sun set behind the roses that bloomed exactly as she'd envisioned. "Are you sure?" Lucy asked, still marveling at the ring on her finger. "Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," Robert replied, pulling her close. Anna was right. Love doesn't diminish when it's shared. Our love doesn't take anything away from what I shared with Anna. It builds on the foundation she laid. What happens now? Now we plan a wedding that honors our past while celebrating our future. We make new traditions while keeping the ones Anna gave us. We love each other, and those boys with everything we have. And we trust that happiness earned through healing is the strongest happiness of all. As if summoned by their contentment, the baby monitor crackled to life with Gabriel's voice. "Lucy, Dada, I love you." "We love you too, sweetheart," Lucy called softly toward the house. "Love you too, baby," Robert added. In the comfortable silence that followed, they sat surrounded by the garden Anna had planted, in the home she'd filled with love, planning a future she'd made possible through her faith that hearts could heal and love could multiply infinitely. The fairy tale was ending exactly as Anna had written it, not with tragedy but with triumph, not with loss but with love renewed, expanded, and made eternal through the family she'd dreamed into existence even as she prepared to say goodbye. Some love stories end with "until death do us part," but Anna's love story continued with "and may love find a way to live on forever," proving that the deepest love doesn't end with death. It simply transforms into something even more beautiful than what came before. 5 years after that transformative February morning, when Lucy first walked through the Miller mansion's front door, the house had evolved into something Anna would barely recognize, yet completely approve of. The formal perfection had given way to the beautiful chaos of a home, where children were encouraged to explore, create, and fill every corner with laughter. The morning of Robert and Lucy's wedding dawned clear and bright, with spring sunshine streaming through windows that now bore small handprint smudges from eager faces pressed against glass. John and Gabriel, now 7 years old and bursting with excitement about their special role in the ceremony, raced through the house in their matching junior groomsmen suits, making airplane noises and occasionally remembering to walk instead of run. "Boys, please don't wrinkle your suits before the ceremony," Grace called from the kitchen, where she was preparing the last-minute details for the reception that would take place in Anna's garden. At 63, she had officially retired from daily housekeeping, but remained the family's beloved matriarch, the keeper of traditions, and the boys' most devoted grandmother figure. "We're being careful, Mrs. Grace," John called back, immediately colliding with the hallway table in his enthusiasm. "Very careful," Gabriel added, attempting to fix his bow tie, which had migrated somewhere near his left ear. In the master bedroom, the room Robert and Anna had shared, which had been lovingly transformed from a shrine to grief into a celebration of continuing love, Lucy stood before the mirror in her wedding dress. It was simple and elegant, chosen not to compete with memories but to honor the present moment. Anna's pearl necklace, gifted by Robert, rested against Lucy's throat, a symbol of blessing and continuity. "So you look beautiful, sweetheart," her brother Matthew said from the doorway. Now 21 and finishing college on a scholarship funded by Robert's quiet generosity, Matthew had grown from the traumatized baby Lucy had raised into a confident young man who considered the Miller family his own. "I can't believe this is really happening," Lucy whispered, smoothing her dress nervously. "Sometimes I wake up thinking I'll find out this was all a dream." "It's real," Matthew assured her, adjusting his own tie, "and Anna would be so proud. You've built exactly the family she dreamed of." A soft knock interrupted them, and Robert appeared in the doorway, handsome in his dark suit, and bearing an expression of wonder that suggested he, too, could hardly believe this day had arrived. "The boy sent me to tell you the photographer is here and wants family pictures before the ceremony," he said, but his eyes were fixed on Lucy as if he were seeing her for the first time. "Go ahead," Matthew said diplomatically. "I'll make sure the twins don't destroy anything important in the next 5 minutes." When they were alone, Robert approached Lucy slowly, as if she might disappear if he moved too quickly. "You're breathtaking," he said simply. "Anna was right. You're exactly what our family needed to be complete." "Are you sure?" Lucy asked, the question that had haunted her throughout their engagement. "Are you absolutely certain we're doing the right thing?" "Look around this room," Robert said, gesturing to the space that had once been a monument to grief, but now held pictures of all of them together, artwork from the boys, and evidence of a life being lived rather than merely endured. "Look at what we've built together. How could this be anything but right?" Their wedding ceremony took place in Anna's garden, which had grown into a masterpiece of carefully planned beauty. White roses climbed arbors, lavender perfumed the air, and the arch where they would exchange vows was framed by the very flowers Anna had chosen for her children's future celebrations. The guest list was intimate but perfect. Grace's extended family, colleagues who had become friends, neighbors who had watched the family heal, and Matthew, who would walk Lucy down the aisle in place of the parents they'd both lost too young. But the most important guests were John and Gabriel, who took their roles as ring-bearers with solemn pride, despite Gabriel's tendency to practice his ring delivery walk at the worst possible moments. "Do you think Mama can see us?" John asked as they waited for the ceremony to begin, straightening Gabriel's bow tie with 7-year-old precision. "Of course she can," Gabriel replied with absolute certainty. "She's in the flowers and the sunshine and Lucy's smile. Mrs. Grace told me so." As the small gathering settled into their seats, Robert took his place beneath the flowered arch, flanked by his sons and overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. 3 years ago, he couldn't have imagined being happy again. Now he was about to marry the woman who had saved his family and become the love of his life. The music began. Not a traditional wedding march, but the lullaby Anna used to sing, played softly on acoustic guitar by a friend who understood the significance of the choice. As Lucy appeared at the garden's entrance, radiant in her simple dress and carrying a bouquet of white roses from Anna's own garden, Robert felt his heart expand, with a joy so complete it took his breath away. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we gather today not to witness the beginning of love, but to celebrate love that has grown from healing, bloomed from hope, and strengthened through the choice to build a family from hearts that have known both loss and recovery." The vows they exchanged were personal, heartfelt, and honest about the unique nature of their love story. Robert promised to love Lucy not as a replacement for what he'd lost, but as the fulfillment of dreams he'd never dared to have. Lucy promised to love John and Gabriel not as children she'd inherited, but as the sons she'd chosen, and who had chosen her in return. "I promise," Robert said, his voice strong and clear, "to build our future on the foundation Anna laid, to honor our past while embracing our tomorrow, and to love you with all the healing my heart has learned." "I promise," Lucy replied, tears of joy streaming down her face, "to love your children as my own, to treasure the family we've built together, and to spend every day proving worthy of the gift Anna gave us when she brought us together." When they exchanged rings, simple bands, engraved with coordinates marking the exact spot in the garden where they stood, both boys cheered with uninhibited delight, causing the entire gathering to laugh through their tears. "You may kiss your bride," the minister announced, and as Robert and Lucy shared their first kiss as husband and wife, a gentle breeze rustled through the garden, carrying with it the scent of roses and something that felt very much like Anna's blessing. The reception that followed was everything Anna had envisioned for her garden, filled with laughter, love, and the sound of children playing among the flowers. John and Gabriel performed an elaborate dance routine they'd been practicing in secret. Grace's famous cake was universally declared perfect, and Matthew's toast about families that choose each other left not a single dry eye in the gathering. As the evening drew to a close and the last guests departed, the new family of 4 found themselves alone in the garden where it all began. The boys, exhausted from excitement, had fallen asleep on blankets beneath the stars, while Robert and Lucy sat close together, marveling at the day and the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Do you think she knows?" Lucy asked softly, gesturing toward the house where Anna's pictures still held places of honor, where her letters continued to guide their family through every milestone. "I know she knows," Robert replied with absolute certainty. "Anna planned all of this, Lucy. She saw it all coming, our healing, our love, our family. This is her greatest gift to us." As if summoned by their conversation, John stirred on his blanket and opened sleepy eyes. "Are we really married now?" he asked drowsily. "Are we really a forever family?" "We're really married," Lucy confirmed, kneeling beside him to brush grass from his hair. "We're really a forever family." "Good," Gabriel murmured from his own blanket, not opening his eyes. "I like forever families." As they carried the sleeping boys inside and tucked them into their beds, Robert and Lucy found themselves in the nursery where their love story had truly begun. The room had long since been converted to a playroom, but the rocking chair remained, and the window still looked out on the garden Anna had planned. "What happens now?" Lucy asked, settling into Robert's arms as they stood looking out at their beautiful, impossible, perfect life. "Now we live," Robert said simply. "We love each other, we raise our boys, we tend our garden, and we trust that some love stories are strong enough to outlast anything, even death. And we read Anna's letters? We read Anna's letters. We celebrate every milestone she planned for. We make sure John and Gabriel grow up knowing they're surrounded by love from this world and the next." In the distance, church bells chimed midnight, marking the end of their wedding day and the beginning of their married life. But for the Miller family, it wasn't really a beginning or an ending. It was simply the next chapter in a love story that had proven love truly is eternal, that families can be built from broken hearts, and that sometimes the most beautiful happy endings come from the ashes of the greatest sorrows. Anna Parker Miller had loved her family enough to plan for their happiness, even without her. Robert Miller had learned that loving again wasn't betraying the past, but honoring it. Lucy Carter had discovered that sometimes home isn't a place you return to, but a family you choose to build. And John and Gabriel Miller had grown up in the absolute certainty that they were loved beyond measure by parents both seen and unseen, in a house where love was stronger than loss, and where every day was proof that some fairy tales really do come true. In the quiet house, surrounded by pictures of their beautiful, blended, chosen family, they settled into sleep knowing that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove that love multiplies infinitely when it's shared. The nanny who changed everything had become the mother who completed everything in a love story that Anna had written from beyond the grave and that would continue to unfold for generations to come. And they all lived happily, completely, gratefully ever after.